By 1989, Pablo Escobar was worth $30 billion, and it was all dirty money, coming from leading one of the most powerful and destructive crime syndicates in history. Escobar led a life truly befitting one of the world's richest men. He burned cash for warmth, had 15 planes to his name, and his real estate portfolio was utterly astonishing. The undisputed focal point, his pride and joy, was the multi-million-dollar Hacienda Napoles mansion. What made this property so special? How much is it really worth? And what's it look like today? Let's find out. But before we do, let's rewind for a moment. How did Escobar become so astoundingly rich in the first place? As the illegal substance industry spread from Colombia into international regions, particularly the US, one man soared to the top of the food chain. That man, at the height of his operations, won a seat in the country's Congress, all while spearheading a system which brought in more than $70 million per day, $26 billion per year, or $810 every single second. The man in question? None other than Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, who went about his business ruthlessly and unforgivingly. In the mid-1970s, he partnered with the Ochoa brothers and helped found the crime organization that we know today as the Medellín Cartel. Through the 80s and early 90s, the cartel ran rampant, earning and spending billions in the process. Pablo threw around exorbitant amounts in bribes for politicians, journalists, law enforcement, and military officials. And just as you'd expect with any high roller in his industry, Pablo had no problem burning cash. Metaphorically, on luxury goods, helicopters, expensive cars, and insane parties, and literally, when he set $2 million alight just to keep his daughter warm. Despite all that spending, a significant amount of his cash went toward this monster of a property, the opulent home to Hacienda Napoles. Now, shall we take a closer look? This house, scratch that, castle, is the creme de la creme of the Escobar collection. You'll find it here, in the small remote town of Puerto Triunfo, about 93 miles east of Medellín and 155 miles northwest of the nation's capital, Bogotá. But why would he opt for such an isolated location? It was simple, really. By being hours away from any major city, Escobar and his disciples were able to run their billion-dollar operation in unprecedented privacy. Just a phone call or two, and he'd have people carrying out his delegated duties in Medellín and beyond. The far from humble abode sits on 7.7 total square miles on rolling countryside land, just under 5,000 acres. And trust us, that was more than enough space to build, well, whatever Escobar darn well please. That includes his very own airport, allowing him to come and go on a whim in one of his countless private planes, without the need to use commercial, government-controlled airports. The unique entranceway reflects this perfectly. The Piper PA-18 Super Cub airplane sitting atop the Hacienda Napoles entrance sign is an identical model to the one used by Escobar on his inaugural American delivery flight. As a busy businessman, keeping his family and employees entertained wasn't always an easy task. Thankfully, Escobar had enough dirty cash in the bank to construct any and all amenities imaginable. Case in point, a full-sized go-kart racetrack. Before too long, the Hacienda Napoles soldiers were racing each other at breakneck speeds, quickly sparking a small gambling trade. As another means of entertaining his henchmen, Escobar decided to install, get this, a bullfighting ring. These showings rapidly became part of the regular routine, and as you can imagine, tens of thousands of dollars were passing hands in illegal betting schemes. Come on, what do you expect? 3 expansive pools scattered the grounds, with plenty of outdoor entertaining space on offer as well. That's relatively normal for the affluent among us. What was far from normal, and perhaps a sign of the fact that Escobar had more than he knew what to do with, was his residential sculpture park. From life-size dinosaurs to woolly mammoths, there was no shortage of outrageous purchases lining the property. Arguably the most famous of them all, however, was this one, an enormous mannequin-like hand hoisting up an army tank. Artistic or totally random? You decide. Either way, it's a unique way to spend a few 100,000 pesos. Pools, dinosaurs, mammoths, and go-karts. It's a fascinating backyard, no doubt, but we haven't even touched on Escobar and Hacienda Napoles' pride and joy, the zoo. During his time living there in the 80s, Pablo successfully arranged for the illegal delivery of all kinds of exotic foreign animals. He spent millions importing elephants, giraffes, antelope, rare birds, ostriches, and ponies, even 4 enormous hippos, 3 females and 1 male. The photos say it all. The zoo brought El Patron plenty of joy over the years, so much so that he even allowed members of the public to wander freely through and share his enjoyment, all under the eye of armed guards, of course. Clearly, the property's grounds were something to marvel at, but so was the mansion itself. Built in a Spanish colonial style, the interior was decorated with symbols of beauty in every corner. And of course, we can't forget to mention the absurdly expensive car collection that he kept on the property. It featured a stretched 1972 Mercedes S600 Pullman, a 1964 Porsche 356, and a 1928 Cadillac V8 Town sedan, which he bought in homage to none other than Al Capone. All up, his collection was estimated to be worth some $4 million, still less than 1% of his total net worth. But in 1989, once Escobar's reign began to crumble, his beloved Hacienda Napoles was raided by Colombian police. They arrested 52 people, seized 6 vehicles, 4 boats, a bulldozer, a satellite dish, 2,000 cattle, and 100 pigs. Before too long, his entire estate had been confiscated, and his beloved pets had been moved to various Colombian zoos. Well, except for the hippos. They were left to roam around, and their population has since grown to over 50. By November of 2006, after nature reclaimed most of the property, Hacienda Napoles' official ownership was finally passed to the Colombian government. At the time, value estimations surpassed $2 million. Decades earlier, at its peak, when we accounted for the excessive amenities plus the animals, the sculptures, the cars, and the treasure chests of cash likely buried in the earth below, the total value of the site would have easily surpassed $15 million. These days, while being so different, it looks much the same. The entrance and sculptures have been preserved, and the sprawling complex now serves as a theme park and zoo. And yes, you can visit. With incomprehensible piles of cash and destructive power at his fingertips, it should come as no surprise that Escobar held the keys to a number of other properties too. This house, nicknamed La Manuela, served as one of Pablo's many vacation spots. It's located here, on the shores of the shimmering Peñol Reservoir, in the resort town of Guatape, not too far from Medellín. In typical Escobar fashion, the property was decked out with everything you'd ever need, plus a ridiculous amount more. It featured a huge pool, multiple tennis courts, a soccer field that doubled as a helipad, guard towers, horse stables, a guest house, a seaplane dock, a dedicated motorcycle driveway, and trees imported from all over the world. But in 1993, this paradise turned to rubble, ripped apart by an enemy explosive attack. Today, the house's interior is scorched and overrun by Mother Nature. Yet the foundations and structure still stand tall. Like Hacienda Napoles, this property has morphed into a unique tourist attraction. Ironically, just decades ago, violent bullets flew in every direction. These days, small yellow paint-filled pellets are fired instead. Yep, it's a paintball arena. As we step inside, you'll notice that the walls are filled with holes where people have desperately searched for stashed money. And this, what used to be Escobar's private disco room, has been repurposed. It's now a bar where visitors can let off steam following a round or two of paintball. At his peak, Pablo Escobar was said to be the 7th richest person on the planet. So long as he had his money and his power, there was no line he wouldn't cross. But there was one thing he was scared of: extradition to the United States. The cartel leader regularly said that he would rather have a grave in Colombia than a jail cell in the US. So, in an effort to remain on Colombian soil, when his operation began to fall apart, he formed an agreement in 1991 with local law enforcement to build his own jail. Well, to call it a jail is a bit of a stretch. Known as La Catedral, or unofficially Hotel Escobar, the former kingpin's self-made multi-million-dollar prison sat on 3 hectares of land and was specifically constructed on a foggy mountainside. Why? Not so much to keep Escobar in, but to keep his enemies out. The 5-star prison had a casino, soccer field, waterfall, nightclub, and spa on site. The property was also fitted with state-of-the-art communications equipment, allowing him to continue his criminal operations while technically in jail. Fast forward to today, and La Catedral, believe it or not, is now home to a monastery. Most of the original structure has been torn apart, ransacked by visitors coming in search of cash and treasure he left behind during his escape in 1992. While Pablo spent much of his time away from the chaos of Medellín, conducting business from afar, he did still own and often live in this apartment complex, the Monaco building in the city's El Poblado neighborhood. It was just a stone's throw from the exclusive club Campestre, a locale often frequented by the cartel for, well, all the wrong reasons. Unsurprisingly, his particular apartment was none other than the penthouse. Similar properties in the area sell for upwards of $300,000 by today's standards. However, this foreboding concrete building is now nothing more than a pile of rubble and dust. In 2018, the mayor of Medellín, this guy, Federico Gutierrez, announced that the site would be turned into a memorial park to honor the victims of the violent Escobar era. Around the same time, another one of his former haunts was demolished, though for an entirely different reason. This, folks, was Escobar's beachside mansion in Miami. El Patron originally acquired this enormous pad at 5860 North Bay Road for $765,500 in 1980. Back then, it had 4 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms and was coated in a familiar pastel pink with contrasting black tiles. The sizable pool was always a focal point. What's it look like now? In 2014, Chicken Kitchen owner Christian de Brodouare bought the place for a cool $9.65 million with the intention of tearing it down and building this modern behemoth of a home. Ultimately though, it was never built. Now the lot, which spans some 30,000 square feet, sits empty. If you feel so inclined to walk in those infamous footsteps, as of 2019, it hit the market for $15.9 million. Christian has already found a buried safe full of, well, you can imagine, so who knows what you might find. In the Escobar heyday, despite his unrelenting violence, he was, to some, considered the Robin Hood of Colombia. He distributed money to the poor, and even invited some of the public to party with him at his secret party home on La Isla Grande. Yep, that's right, another property. This one boasted more than 300 lavish rooms for guests and partygoers to crash in, with an immense courtyard full of palm trees and an oversized pool overlooking the Caribbean Sea. Make no mistake about it, this was one of the biggest party pads in the world at the time. Despite being unfinished when Pablo was taken down, he would have still invested tens of millions into the island, the property, and the crazy party lifestyle. Yet, just like many of his other homes, the palace on La Isla Grande has turned into little more than a dilapidated symbol of a past world, now hosting nothing more than vegetation, squatters, and wild animals. What's the first thing you'd do if you were as rich as Pablo Escobar? Let us know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and have a great day. Catch you next time.